Cast your ballot, hope for the best. This is where your vote rests. Oh, what we gonna do?
Good evening. My name is Bahman Yazdonfar, and this is Voters Echo, a weekly program to bring to you different perspectives, different opinions of our politicians, our citizens, our voters, and individuals to you to have better understanding of different perspectives that is available to our society, to our political system, and so on, for you to have better judgment when the next time around you go to the ballot box to cast your vote. A couple of disclaimer: I am under payroll of nobody, no individual, no entity, no political party, no unions whatsoever. I do this show on my own. The airtime for this show is donated to me by Dr. James Sears as part of his credit with that channel's studio, which I appreciate him in advance. I am not neither member nor sympathizer of any mainstream political party, federally or provincially, and I am completely impartial in this matter. If you want to help me either in the form of the human resources or in a monetary, which I haven't received anything as of now, you can go to our website, www.votersecho.com, and drop a line or two. I will appreciate, and I will be more than glad to talk to you and communicate with you. Now, without further ado, tonight's guest is one of our local MPP, and I ask her to introduce herself and tell you and us about her journey. Julia, please, first of all, thank you for accepting my invitation and being here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Julia Munro, and I'm the MPP for York-Simcoe. And that is an area between Newmarket and Barrie.
So which is north of the Newmarket.
That's right. So the northern part of York Region and the southern part of Simcoe County are the municipalities.
Is this big area, though?
Well, it is. As a matter of fact, not as big as they are in rural and northern parts of the province.
But for the north of Toronto.
But for a GTA riding, it is a big geographic area.
Especially compared to the Newmarket, which is very tiny.
Well, relatively speaking, that's right. The boundaries of the riding have changed during the time I've been elected, and I have had the privilege of representing Newmarket. Then a few years ago they changed the boundaries to bring Newmarket and Aurora together, and then put Innisfil and Bradford West Gwillimbury as kind of the mirror opposite of this East Gwillimbury and Georgina in the York region.
So which is the other side on the east side.
That's right. That's why I said it's sort of the mirror image, because between them is the Lysyk-Simcoe, of course. Okay. The southerly
How long have you been representing this place?
I was elected in June of 1995.
Oh, so you're one of the veterans.
That's right. That's right.
Was it at the time of Mike Harris?
That's right. That's right.
So you were in the government.
I was, and I had the privilege of being the parliamentary assistant to the Premier in 1995. And one of the things, even though it was one of the earliest things I did in my political career, but one about which I take some pride, is that under his guidance and leadership, we did a study of the voluntary sector in this province, and there was a report tabled as well, and it hasn't been done since.
And what is that?
Well, we talked to people in all aspects of the voluntary sector, whether it was people who provide leadership in Scouts and Brownies and things like that, whether it was major funding arrangements like hospitals, for instance. But whatever seemed to be important role, to be able to identify the important role that volunteers played in our society. And I to this day feel that it was an important initiative on the part of the Premier Mike Harris at the time. because it offered an opportunity to demonstrate the tremendous value that volunteers play in our everyday life. In fact, if you ask somebody, why do you like living here? Chances are they'll tell you that what they enjoy the most is something that's provided by the volunteer sector. They appreciate a community where there's lots of, coaches teaching kids soccer or hockey or whatever.
A sense of the altruistic kind of the response to the lifestyle.
Exactly, because it's quality of life issues that very often, you think of the thousands of people who have been driven to their cancer treatment appointments. I mean, that's a voluntary sector activity, and it's one that, and in the broader way, it says who we are, that we're a kind of community that represents people who look for opportunities to help each other. And we really wanted to, in that process, to be able to identify significant areas and what contribution they made, and then to say to them, what should government provide you with? What are the things? What's the role of government to help you? And there are several things that came out of that. One was a much more vigorous recognition of people in the community who'd had 5 years or 10 years or up to 35 and 50 years of volunteering. And those initiatives have carried forward ever since.
Do we still have those?
Mm-hmm. We do indeed.
Even though we have 12 years of the Liberals government?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, I think that everybody recognized it as a good thing to be doing. And so it's always been done since then.
You were with the government of Mike Harris for almost 8 years then?
That's right.
Okay. For during that 8 years, can you just, as I earlier mentioned, the purpose of this program, education, what was your job as an MPP who is part of government? In the morning you get up and go to out of your constituency, but when you go to the Queen's Park, what you do really?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Well, it's a question that is a really good question, because there's so much variety that it's hard to pin down one thing and say, well, on Monday morning we did this.
So it's not like I have a...
So I have a timetable, which is updated every week, and sometimes during the week, to say you're meeting with this group, you're doing this, whatever different things you might be doing. Because you said in the 8 years, and so then I'll take it from what you would do as a member of the government and what you would do as a member of the opposition. But I later was the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Transportation, and also later on I was the parliamentary assistant to Dave Tabucci when he was the chair of Management Board and Minister of Culture. And so there were things that I would do as that parliamentary assistant. And, just to give you an example, because it's the sort of thing that never gets the headlines, obviously.
No, that is why. This show is not about what you read in the Toronto Star.
but it shows you that the kind of work that people do in government. Yeah. And when I was in transportation, the ministry had begun a process of looking at the way in which trucks were, the weight of truck.
Oh yes, they do it a check.
Gross vehicle weight.
Yes.
And what had come to be understood was that you needed to measure the weight of the axles, because it's the wheels that are turning the corners, that are onto the highway, for instance, or off, and that's where the wear and tear on the roads actually comes from.
Anything that's moving is usually.
That's right, but also because of the fact that the weight is all on the truck basis, on the
wheels,
axles,
yes.
on the wheels. And so there was a process that had begun of consulting with the various people driving trucks of various weights and purposes. And so it was a really well thought out process by which people would consult with the different people in the different trucking industries and look at ways by which they could introduce changes that wouldn't be onerous in terms of the cost to the truck driver, but it would be understood by the trucking industry. You know, we need to have a better way of measuring, and we need to be able to lessen the load of the truck, as I say, intersections and places and entry onto the superhighways would be the places where you'd see the most wear and tear, and bridges and things like that. So I mean, it's not a headline, but it demonstrates kind of the commitment.
Safety issue is
It demonstrated the science, the engineering, the consultation, and obviously the safety issue. So things like that.
And you were involved. You
I actually
physically
chaired
involved with all of this consultation, or the
Yes.
scientific or mechanical aspect of that, or anything.
I didn't get involved in the scientific and the engineering.
No,
but
I mean
did.
receiving the report
Oh,
of
yes.
the
Oh,
report
yes.
and say based on these people said this.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I chaired the meetings as the parliamentary assistant, and people came and listened and made deputations, and the ministry explained to the stakeholders, who are the truck drivers and the owners of the trucks, why we were doing this and why it was an important initiative. So that just, when you say, what did you do?
No, you must be very patient to sit in that kind of, chairing that kind of meeting, because there is I'm pretty sure there must be a lot of heat
Well,
exchange.
there was certainly some, and it had to be respected, because obviously people are making a living out of trucking, and you can't make the rules or the costs so onerous that people are not able to function anymore. So we had to consider how much to influence over a period of time that would allow for adjustments, and that people would still have a way of earning a living at the end of the process. So that was certainly an interesting one. And yes, I learned more about trucking and axle weight.
In that position, probably you never thought about that before.
Well, no, I hadn't. And the other thing about it that was kind of fun was that we'd be driving along the highway, and I would look, they've got
that is what we were talking about.
That's right.
Let me ask you, after 2003, when the government changed to the hand of liberals, of course there is a shift mentally, physically, prestige-wise, from the people, from the government, when they go to the opposition.
Mm-hmm.
So not only individually, but also in the form as a group of the party members,
Mm-hmm.
because you had maybe certain plans to go forward, and all of a sudden it's
You don't do that.
interrupted, and now someone else comes and either they change it or they don't continue or whatever. What is the dynamic, the mental dynamic of that moment? The day, night of the election, you get elected, but I'm pretty sure those didn't get elected were upset, of course. But being in the position of in the government and then sitting the other side.
Well, obviously the first reaction is that you'd like to be there with your party, because it has plans and ideas that that you think are good, and that's why you run as
of course,
in the
you
party
have your
that
own convictions, whether or not agree, whether
Exactly.
agree or disagree.
And so it's disappointing because you see that things that you may have worked on may not be, picked up or carried forward or anything like that. And so that's frustrating, because obviously you thought there was a value to whatever the initiative was. But in terms of your own personal, I think you appreciate the fact that your voters voted for
Of course,
you.
of course.
And the
By the way, tip of my hat, 20 years being, hey, you must have done, you must doing something something well worth for the constituents.
Well, I feel very privileged that I've run successfully 6 times. In the 20 years
I
is-
had
is
John
just-
McKay from Liberal Party, from a federal counterpart, of course, here in my show, and he was re-elected after 18 years again.
Yes.
I mean, very seldom you see in the federal and provincial politics, certain people get
Manage
that kind
to
of
get-
longevity in the political.
Yes, and it certainly is very gratifying, obviously, to have that
Being,
happen.
yes.
But you know, the other thing is that you have to look at some of the things from opposition that you will speak out against, like anytime you have a chance, because you don't think it's the right thing to do, or you think there needs to be more clearness, more transparency on certain things, and when you look at other issues, you're looking at it from the point of view of, well, can we make this better? And in opposition, each of us has a critic portfolio, and so
And you are?
and I do as well.
No, I know. Okay, you're critiquing what?
I'm the critic for the Ontario pension plan.
Okay. Well, it's a well-worded portfolio. I mean.
Oh yes, it certainly keeps me busy.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, because it's not just one or two.
That's right. So you develop, a certain level of expertise. I think that's one of the things that I would say characterizes MPPs regardless of party or whether you're in government or you're in opposition, is that it is always a learning curve because you're put in the position where I described the truck waits, and then from there I'm looking at
just in a financial issue.
That's right, and then I'm dealing with a relatively complex financial issue. So there's always that kind of broadening that you have to do regardless. And in opposition, I have had several different portfolios, children and youth, and small business. But the current one is the Ontario Registered
And that's a
Pension
good
Plan.
segue for me. How your caucus decides on which portfolio goes to whom and when?
That's really the leader. The leader makes that decision. It more often in the federal cabinet or in the federal government than in the provincial. The federal refer to the opposition as the shadow cabinet.
Okay.
And it's a term that gets used more in the federal context. But where you see it is, to answer the question you just asked me, who makes the decision? The leader does.
Not necessarily how these decisions are being made.
Well, the leader makes the decision.
Okay.
And the same way that the premier would choose his cabinet.
His cabinet.
So that's why I say that in that regard, it is like a shadow cabinet.
The reason I asked that question is because you mentioned a couple of important issues. One was the fact that you are always on your toes because you don't know what kind of the portfolio come to your hand.
Right.
So you don't know from Axel get to the finance, from finance to youth, and
Right.
so on. The reason I ask that because if I assume I am a leader of the party, and Julia was doing transportation thing, for instance,
Right.
all of a sudden I decide to give the youth issue to Julia. Do I think whether or not this portfolio could be more challenging in a matter of the time needed to develop on that, or just I decide to put different people to be versatile in every I mean, just the mentality of the...
Right. But it is a question that, as I say, ultimately it's the leader's decision. But I think that how the factors that might go into his decision making certainly would include areas of expertise, or area of expertise but flexibility. So therefore, maybe she's tired of this and we'll give her something new to do. So it becomes then, or there may be issues that are around the corner that someone has a really good handle on. And so that person would be a person to put in transportation, for instance. So it comes down to the leader looking at the list of critic portfolios that he's got to assign, and kind of the way the strengths of the individuals and where they might be best. In our caucus right now, for instance, Jeff York is the critic for health. Well, he's a pharmacist by profession.
Okay, that was my point. I mean, he has some sort of the connection.
I think I think all of us thought that was a really good decision.
But you were not mechanic, for instance.
So we were, I think all of us as caucus were like, this is a good person to give it to. And I think it is, because obviously he's in a health
I have to have
profession.
him here to talk about our state of health.
and so it's probably a quicker learning curve for him than it is maybe for someone
else. Yes.
So sometimes it'll be by geography. Like if you happen to come from a particular geographic area of the province, and we don't have much representation there, then obviously some critic portfolio that reflects the interests of those areas.
Like agriculture, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that would also figure into that.
Now that you mentioned the leader, it's a good segue. How is the new leader doing?
Oh, I think he's great. he's
No, because there was a lot of hype in the media about the amount of the money that he's owing and this kind of thing.
Which of course there always is. I mean, it's one of the things about our democracy, that you can have all the chatter going around.
Well, it is especially when we have a liberal media that we cannot.
Well, that's true. No, I think he's great. I'll tell you why. I mean, he's very focused on 2018 and what we need to do between now and at the next election. And he's got all kinds of energy. He's very open to conversations.
I have seen his recent approach to the issue of the hydro and all of that. I saw some of the footage. Now that you mention election, let me ask you something. What's happened last year? Why all of a sudden these people got majority?
I'm sorry?
How did these liberals got majority with that kind of record?
With the record.
No, I mean, let me clarify my question. As I said, I am not a partisanship, conservative or liberal or NDP. And in my previous shows, I mentioned once, if anyone I blame for the premature election should be NDP, that they didn't respond at that time from my perspective. But how is possible Mike Harris, when he had a little bit of the opposition regarding his approach to the issues, cost him the election, yet liberals, with having all of these scandals, like Mars, like Orange, like a Hydro, and list goes on and on. I'm not even going through the list.
No, but there is a list.
I know that. I wrote about it. Still I am a little bit flabbergasted about how these people, I mean liberals, get elected as a majority.
Well, I think there are...
What is your opinion? I don't want you to tell me about the stance of your party. I don't want to put you in that kind of...
No, but I think there are two things. and they're related. One of them is the unfair practice of the advertising. And I mean, nobody can believe that you can have third-party
I know, I am aware of that.
advertising. So I think that that explains a lot. People don't realize that a political party has people donate. And if you know, I say to people, if I don't have a fundraiser, I don't have the money to have brochures or a campaign office or pay for signs or anything like that. And I'm not complaining. I think that's the right way to do it. But that's the reality. But because, in fact, I consider it to be a very, very important piece to the democratic process, that it's volunteer money, that and it's not too much. You can't give me so much that I am now beholden to you. I think that's very important. But what we have in this province at this time is the government turns a blind eye to changing the rules.
You mean Liberal government?
Yes.
Yeah.
On money being used, third-party advertising, and it's the unions, the collection of unions, and I don't even think that the rank and file of membership.
We saw the issue of the teachers and the allocation of the few $1 million just for the process, going through the process of negotiation.
That's right. It's the first time I've ever known that the government pays for the
I didn't know, and
negotiation.
nobody, when they fired me from my previous jobs, nobody paid me to go to the office of my boss
No.
and talk to him.
No,
They just
exactly.
get me and didn't pay for that time neither. They just
No.
give me check to the lady yesterday.
But these are egregious things that influence, have a huge influence on people when they see the kind of advertising that was done, and there's no political will to make any changes by the Liberals.
Let me ask you, just play a little bit of the devil advocate. You are a mainstream party. I mean, one of the major two parties. I mean, NDP came to become material in Ontario, at least after Bob Rae. Before that, we didn't ever had any NDP government. Now, you are one of the major parties. Don't you have third-party contributors?
Oh, yes, but there are rules about how much they can.
When I spoke to Elections Ontario, Chief of Elections Ontario last year, the rules are not as stringent as the candidates or the political parties. I mean, the rules are there, but it's not being, at least what I understood, the rules are not being very strict as the financing.
They certainly are on a local level. I mean, every single donation.
No, I'm talking about the whole idea of the general. I'm not talking about individual.
Oh, okay.
I mean, for instance, in your riding, you are being scrutinized for every penny that you collected.
Oh, yes.
And every penny, and it has to be audited. Even I ran as provincially as well as financially myself. I know even if I don't spend a penny, still I have to file 20-page paper, give it to them, and then I have to send it, and they have to pay the auditor $1,300 or to $1,100 or $700, depending to the tariff, what
That's
kind
right.
of that, to be verified. But when it comes to the province-wide or even national-wide, when the unions start to advertise for the conservative or for the liberals, the restriction is not.
No, that is the whole point. Is that our objection to that third-party advertising, because there's no rules that say that they can't do that, so they do.
And what is disadvantages? Let's say I'm just using last year election for an example. What was the disadvantages of the Conservative Party of Ontario in relation to Liberal when it comes to the third party? You had less third party supporters?
Well, we had. I don't know whether it's the number of supporters, but the amount of money.
The
amount of money is huge difference.
Really?
Oh yeah, because the unions were supporting the Liberals, and so they would put money, a great deal more money. The money that our party had was individual. It would be some commercial, some companies and things like that. But
it was not like mass union, like
no, exactly. And that's where we have said that it's not fair. It's not fair to have these unions able to spend millions of dollars. First of all, they have the millions of dollars to spend, which we don't, and there's no restriction on them.
And let me ask you your opinion again, your personal opinion, because you have been elected a number of times for the last 20 years. So apparently your constituents are devoted constituents to you in your writing.
Enough to get me back.
Okay, that's fine. Listen, I didn't get even 50 or 70 votes. I know what kind of the hurdle it is. But I want to ask you, when it comes to voters, electorate, collectively,
right?
We have, first of all, low turnout voters in general. We have 40% even don't show up. But out of the 60% who show up, we like, as a general public, we like to believe that they are informed voters,
right,
which I don't agree, but again, is my personal opinion. Why, after all of this publicity about the scandals, still voters go to the ballot box and see the name Liberals, which they cite the day before on the Toronto Star about the scandal of, let's say, so and so and so on.
Right.
What makes them? Is it resentment from, let's say, conservatives, like a vote away kind of the thing, or is it really doesn't register to their head that, hey, yesterday I read this thing?
It's a good question to ask. It's we're trying to peek inside the heads of the voters, and that's a tough job. But I think that people, even though we're subjected to news and all news stations, and it's like that information comes to us constantly, but people tune it out. I can't believe the number of people who will say to me, "Oh, I didn't know about whatever issue it was." Oh, and then sometimes they'll have a soundbite of something. It's quite remarkable how difficult it is to get a message out. That people.
You mean to message out or to message inside the head of the...
Oh, to get inside the head. But to get the message out so people understand, why they shouldn't be doing something or why they should be considered. I asked the Premier when Mr. McGuinty, when in the middle of the orange scandal, I asked him in the question period, why would a government sign a contract with a company to provide an air ambulance service when it didn't own an aircraft?
That is a very legitimate question.
And
not to mention putting someone that for $400,000.
That's another question that could be asked. But anyway,
what was his response?
His response, and you can see it or read it in Hansard. He said he didn't know. That
is a good anecdote, and I want to ask you, not from perspective of conservative or liberal or anyone, but from perspective of the politician as well as an electorate, because you vote too. As a voter, when I'm sitting at my home and I see my taxpayer money is being wasted, doesn't matter if it is conservative or liberal or NDP. federally, provincially, or municipally. And I am asking myself, the person who get elected there either does not know what he or she is doing, or if he or she knows what she doing, is doing it for a personal agenda. If I see it wrong,
Right.
I'm not saying all decision, I'm just saying
No,
that.
no.
So in both cases, that person should not be there.
You raise an interesting question because there is no,
Recall.
well, yeah, that too. But there's also, anybody can run virtually. I
Yes,
mean,
my run.
I remember one year that there were almost 500 people running for some political office in York Region. Now, York Region is 9 municipalities, I think. I hope I'm not wrong. It might be 11. But anyway, inside each of them would be so many
You're
positions.
talking about the before amalgamation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so each municipality might elect, we're going to say, for 10 or 12 people, but there might be another 40 or 50 people that were trying to get one of those jobs, and so anybody can run.
Well,
And
we had the mayor, or we had 65 people
That's
running.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the responsibility of the voter is certainly to find out something about the person that they're going to potentially vote for, and I think that that's a tough thing to do sometimes. They're physically remote from you enough that you might see a glimpse on a news clip, or you get a pamphlet in your mailbox.
If you read it.
Yes. But actually getting an insight into somebody is very difficult, I think, for the average voter.
Which brings the issue of the money, which you alluded earlier on that. When you have more money, you can send more messages, whether it's false or true.
That's
Is that
right.
correct?
There's no screening on that part.
There's
You
no.
got the money,
I mean,
you put it in.
hey, it's a free speech, and I am extremely advocate of free speech,
Yeah.
regardless of. Doesn't matter who says anything. In fact, I get to the point that I don't even like these words that they are. Personally, I don't want the words that they are prohibiting from our language, because I believe in order to society function properly, I have to know how you think.
Yes.
So otherwise, how do I know what
Right.
is the other thinking? But about the message, coming back about the election, which you mentioned about the third-party fundings or extreme fundings for the liberals, when they send all of those messages, let's say if you and I running in this riding, and if you send 5 pamphlets and I send 10 pamphlets,
Yes.
of course the voters at the end of the day goes to the ballot box, saw my name 5
10
times, the
times,
same size,
yeah.
5 times more than you do.
Yeah.
They did, and so doesn't it bother you as a politician that that this kind of I don't want to say ignorance, but maybe gullibility of the public when it comes to the electoral process could impact the democracy by itself?
I think that you've captured one of the most difficult things that we face today, is the fact that you need an engaged, responsible voter, and that's tough. It's tough for people to get the messages to them. It's tough for them to pay attention to those messages and understand them and have a respect for them. And so it's some. I guess my answer to you in that regard is on the frame of my license plate, which says, "Democracy, don't waste it."
Don't waste it.
Don't waste it.
Which we are doing it practically.
Well, in many areas, I feel we are.
No, no. Listen. I am a cynic in general, but I believe really we are. Or I mean, even in municipal level, last year we elected 27 of the 28 incumbent.
Yeah.
So that means these people have nothing wrong in the last 4 years. All of them get reelected. So what in fact what it tells me is these people get elected because 4 years they had a advantage of the recognition of the name and using the office being used, or not using, but office being used for their campaign.
Well, it's just the fact that they're there, and so, and if nothing too drastic has happened, then obviously incumbency.
Well, the only one drastic happened was Rob Ford, and Rob Ford went from the
right.
Coming back, Chris, how we are doing at the time? 77, 10 minutes. 10 minutes about the issues right now.
Yes.
Couple things. I want to mention. You mentioned about the health critic. I am very personally, from my personal experience, as I'm sitting here, I'm experiencing that they discussed it with the whole healthcare issue the same way that is being run right now. That is one thing, and we are spending over $50 billion.
That's right.
On that, and I went to emergency just 12 days ago, and I sat there for 5 hours, and I get nothing out of that, and I came out home with the same condition, same thing. So, having said that, the reason I brought it up, while I was sitting there, because my mind was working,
Yeah, sure.
and I'm just talking to a couple other patients, and I realized a couple other patients that I spoke to, they were in the emergency earlier that day, and they came back 5 hours later with the same condition. Nothing happened. So I was not the only one.
Right.
So I am not that. I am paranoid.
No.
Now, which brings me to the question, the first part of the question: where this money goes?
Oh. Well,
I mean, where is the books and the balances?
Just to give you an example, the Auditor General
Yes,
did an examination, a special piece on the CCACs, the Community Care Access Centers. And over the years, the money has sort of lopsided into administration rather than frontline patient care. And in her report, she says that, it's about 40 cents on the dollar.
Goes to administration.
No, goes to the patient.
60%, 60
Yeah, and so, and we've looked at the Sunshine List,
Yes, 100, 11,000,
yeah,
12,000.
and you look over the years at the Sunshine List in areas like that, and there are huge salary increase. They go along during the 90s when they were brought in, and it's just sort of hums along, and there's nobody there from the CCAC. All of a sudden, you start getting salary increases, huge, for the administration. And so it's been something that we have identified, because the Auditor General has identified by examining the books of about 5 CCACs that she compared. And so there's people earning $200,000 and $300,000 in being in charge in the.
Well, the top of the list was the guy who in the hydro one.
Oh yes.
The $1.7 million, and I mean that is first of all, that is ridiculous, especially in this austerity measure that we have.
To me, it's not justifiable. But you ask about the question of where the money goes,
Yeah.
And that one is a recent one. To give you an example, The other thing is that the Liberals have not built long-term care beds. When we were in office, we built thousands, about 20,000 long-term care beds, because we know where the population is going. It's expanding in that age group. And what's happened then is that hospitals have people that they have nowhere to send, because they may require a level of care they can't provide through home care, and so they should be in a long-term care facility. Well, there aren't any. There's waiting lists. I mean, there are long-term care facilities, but they don't match the need, is what I'm saying. And so they're taking up beds in hospitals, which is not where they belong. So there are some systemic issues that have been allowed.
And what do you contribute this matter? Is it going back to your previous example when McGinty said I didn't know? Do you personally contribute that to the ignorance or just
No.
incompetence?
One
of these two.
Given the two choices, I would
why?
say
There couldn't be any other choices.
No. I think I'll choose the incompetence box.
I agree with you. I wanted to give it to you. I have my own point.
But I'll tell you why, is because I think that there was so much of the rhetoric around healthcare was people want healthcare at home. Well, that's true, but there's a level of care line that can't be done at home, and I'll give you one example. When a constituent came to me about her mother, and her mother had gone to emerge and got sent home. You can obviously relate to that.
Practice.
And anyway, there was time passed, and of course she became much worse, and so she had to be admitted. So they admitted her, and the daughter had moved to be able to live with her mother and care for her mother, which would be the best circumstance. But the problems of complications that she ran into and the time when they had to put her in the hospital, now she couldn't go home because she was called a 2-bed assist. And that means that she had to have 2 people help her get out of bed. Well, this lady, the daughter, couldn't fulfill that. So she's sitting in a hospital because there is no long-term care bed where there would be a 2-bed assist easily. And I think that has similar to my own mother, who, when I visited her, and I said, because I could see that she was slipping down into the bed. So I said, here, let me do this. And she said, don't touch me. And I was, okay. She said, I will call the nurse because she won't hurt herself or me.
Oh, yes.
You might end up hurting yourself or her.
No, of course.
And
you could have a bad back or anything could happen.
So somebody who knows what they're doing, obviously, is preferable. Well, I relate my personal story because when this lady said that, she couldn't take her mother home now, and the mother is in a hospital bed when that's not where she should be.
You see, this scenario you just described, or as well as what I told you about myself, it's not just a patient issue. People who, for instance, this lady has to lose the productivity as a member of the society to be there.
That's right.
So it's not just loss in one level.
That's right.
It's lost in number of the level, and when you said 60 cents of the dollar goes to the administration, actually it makes sense, because while I was sitting there, I noticed the hospital, the procedure. I watched the nurses and the RNs and the person. First, I have to go and introduce myself, and then they send me to someone else to get the symptoms.
Yes.
And then they send me somewhere else, the third person, who gave me a paper asking more questions. Then I go another room two nurses sitting and asking again the same question based on reading, and then they send me to the waiting room to wait for the 4 hours or so. When I was there and I looking at it, I noticed, because as our previous show you were witnessed is about business, I noticed what you said is correct. Emphasis of the hospital on the KPI, key performance indicator of the staff, was more important than patients who are sitting there.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, I think we've created. We're also, and this would be another program, drowning in red tape, where there are so many rules, there are so many forms to fill in, there are so many times of not being productive, but making sure you filled in the right form.
And before we end, I just ask a question. Maybe you can shed some light to that before we go off the air. And that is why we practice Westminster parliamentary system, of course, in Canada, in all levels, or at least provincial and federal. Why this kind of incompetence or ignorance? Again, I want to give the benefit of doubt in certain issues. When it goes on, why as a parliamentarians, having opposition people, either it is two-party, one-party, three-party, doesn't matter, federal or provincial, why they cannot stop it at one point? Why we do not have that kind of the provision in our laws? Because the government could go insane at one point.
I understand your question, and I guess, you know, when you think back to like 100 years ago, I'm thinking, when was 100 years ago? It wasn't in the 19s, it was in the 20s. But the people that chose to run for public office, well, first of all, they were men.
Well, yes.
Yeah. And then generally, I don't say this with a scientific or academic ability to tell you exactly, but I think it's reasonable that it was men who were successful. They generally were older, and they had, you know, a career.
Well established in this, like an old Roman Empire that is senates
the
and
Senate,
people of the distinguished has the right to vote or something like that. Yeah.
A sort of senatorial
Yes.
kind of. It would have that. That would be the person that would come, and if you take 100 years ago in this province, a much smaller population, a much shorter distance between the people in charge and the people in the community. Those are all things that would enhance the democratic experience. Now we have to look at it with the technology that we have, with the broadening of the social base that take on these roles. I don't think there's anything wrong with democracy. I think it's us who have to adjust to what do we really want out of it. You want an engaged and respectful on both sides. The politician should be somebody who's respected and respectful, and that's how you reach conclusions. I worked on a little committee this afternoon, and it was a member of each of the parties, and one of the people, not one of us, but one of the
others,
said, "Now, why can't you guys do this more often?" And that is, the three parties have agreed on something and so forth.
Collaborative.
Yes, and if you go back and look at even 40 or 50 years ago. It was much more collaborative than it is today.
Well, before party politics, Trump's the people politics was like that before 72, 73, which they started to put the name of the parties on the ballot.
That's right. That's right. And so there are small things that would have huge impact. Before we sign off here, I'll tell you just one example. When we were in government, not every bill, but several bills were, after first reading, they had public hearings. And by having public hearings at that point, the lines weren't drawn about the bill because the bill wasn't drafted. So we were working with, here's a framework of what we want.
And what we get as a feedback.
And then we get the feedback. And you had a real sense. Sometimes it was just one person would come and make a deputation and say, you've got to do this. And the next person would say, do everything but that.
Well,
but then
regardless, what again it goes back to the free speech thing. You
exactly.
know at least what's out there.
You had a clear idea. You know, this group is going to be happy, this group isn't. Can we find common ground? But at least you know what the circumstances are. The other thing is what that would also do is put the onus on the individuals sitting in the committee, because they're not there as the
combative kind of the
no. So that's what I would change.
I think, as you said, a collaborative approach from all sides. After all, they're supposed to be member of the representative of the public, which I found out. That is why I said party politics trumps people's
Oh yes, yes.
And secondly is, I believe with all my heart, as long as we don't have recall system, these things are going on, and we can't stop it. Julia, thank you for being gracious guest and being here. It was very informative, by the way.
Thank you.
And the copy of this will be available within a couple of days on YouTube for the future generation to look at it and see what you said, what kind of the input you brought to the, not only to program, for the public.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't have too many of the viewers. However, over time, this stays there as an archive,
right.
so they can reference to that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us this Tuesday, 8th of December 2015. We have one more of the Voters Echo next week, and after that we are going for the holidays, and we come back again on New Year. Please, as I always remind you, take part in your electoral process, which I believe is the only thing left of democracy as I see it. Help your candidates, become a volunteer, donate, vote, call your MPPs, talk to your MPPs and MPs and your councillors, and more importantly, the next election comes along, roll up your sleeve and become a candidate yourself. Good night.
Oh, there's a good way to end.
Cast your ballot, hope for the best. This is where your vote rests. Oh, what we gonna do? Democracy, is it just a joke? Oscar Wilde said it best when he wrote simply, bludgeon of the people, by the people, for the people. Divide and conquer, well, that sometimes works. You can always find some sad soul who's been hurt to turn into a radical in the name of the Lord. So let the voters echo, let their voices be heard. Let us join together for a peaceful and better world, a place for everyone to have their say. Let the voters echo out today. Let the voters echo loud and free. So let the voters world. Let their voices be heard. Let us join together for a peaceful and better world, a place for everyone to have the say. Let the voters echo out today. Let the voters echo loud and free. Yeah, let the voters echo loud and free.